Hello everyone, I'm Jim Rohn, and today we're going to dive deep into an issue that perhaps all of us have faced: avoidance. You know, that uncomfortable feeling when someone suddenly disappears from your life? No messages, no calls, just silence. But is it really ghosting, or are they simply not responding for some reason? Where is the real difference, and why does it make you feel so restless? Are you asking yourself, what did I do wrong, or why am I not important enough for them to reply? Don't worry, you're not alone. In this video, I'll reveal the secret behind avoidance behavior, from the deep psychology of the one who is ghosting to how to distinguish it from someone just temporarily going silent. You'll discover what's really going on in their head, and more importantly, how to overcome that feeling of being abandoned. Stay until the end of the video, because I have a surprising tip that will help you regain your confidence in situations like this. If you want to understand human psychology better and not miss out on interesting analyses like this, hit subscribe right now. Together, we'll decode every corner of emotions. There are times in life when we have to face relationships that once caused us deep pain. Even very deep. One of you shared a very realistic and common situation. I have an ex who drained me emotionally. After a long period of silence, this person suddenly texted wanting to talk again. It sounds normal, but I know their true nature, always crossing my boundaries, turning my life into an emotional roller coaster. I've made a lot of effort to move past the old wounds and rebuild peace for myself. So now, should I keep replying every time they text, just to avoid being called a bad person? And is there really a right moment to cut off contact or simply stop responding without any explanation? This is what I want to break down further, because clearly everything has its own timing and context. First, let's talk about ghosting, disappearing from someone's life without a word and not responding. How are these two different? For me, ghosting is not just silence, it carries deeper reasons. It depends on your intentions, the emotions you're carrying, and the state of the previous relationship. For example, if it's someone who drained you emotionally, could cutting off contact be a way to protect yourself? Or are you just avoiding a difficult conversation? I think the interesting part is that each choice reflects a part of who you are, and sometimes silence is the loudest message. What do you think about that? Let's say you have an ex, the kind of person who only shows up once a year, maybe on your birthday, to wish you well and then disappears. If you don't reply, does that mean you're ghosting them? I don't think so. And do you have to respond just because they text? Definitely not. In fact, life sometimes gives you the right to stay silent, especially when that person brings negative energy or no longer has a place in your journey. You don't always have to open the door to anyone who knocks, especially when they've once messed up your world. Now, let's dive into ghosting a little, the act of completely disappearing from someone's life without any prior warning. It's different from simply not responding to an annual birthday message. Ghosting is truly when you cut off a relationship that was regular, with some level of connection, without leaving even a single mark. Perhaps the person chooses this because they are emotionally exhausted, because they are afraid of facing the situation, or simply because they don't know how to say goodbye properly. But what makes ghosting a sharp knife is the emptiness it leaves behind. The person being ghosted often wonders, what did I do wrong? Or what's happening? The absence of an explanation makes it a wound that is hard to heal, because it's not just an end, but an open question. That's why ghosting is painful. It's not only the departure, but a silence full of doubt. Have you ever wondered why such a silent action can cause such a big impact? Imagine you're texting someone every day. Perhaps you've been dating for weeks, months, or even years. Then one day they suddenly disappear. No texts, no goodbye, nothing. I've heard of someone being ghosted right in the middle of a 2-year relationship, and can you imagine that? It leaves a mess in the head of the one left behind, a bunch of unanswered questions, a feeling of floating as if the wire's been cut in midair, and a lingering pain from not understanding what happened. That kind of ghosting is like an invisible punch. It doesn't just knock you down, but makes you ask yourself where you went wrong. But hold on, not all ghosting is evil or terrible. Let's think about another situation. You don't have a clear or ongoing relationship with someone, but they keep showing up, crossing the boundaries you've set, or worse, pulling you into their own emotional games. For example, There's someone who's avoidant. One day they're sweetly pulling you in, the next day they silently pull away, and it repeats in an endless cycle. If you keep responding every time they reach out, aren't you just putting yourself in a position of being torn again and again? I don't think you need to do that. Sometimes not responding is not malice, but a way to protect yourself from new wounds. When someone just wants to take advantage of your emotions without caring about the consequences, you have the right to step out of that play without asking for permission. What do you think? Is silence the only way to preserve your own peace? The answer is no. Silence isn't always avoidance. Sometimes it's a clear message: I choose peace over chaos. And that's also the first step of an emotional maturity journey. Sometimes completely stopping communication with someone is the right choice, especially when that person brings negative energy or drags you into unnecessary wounds. If every interaction with them only makes you feel heavy, exhausted, or even hurt, why force yourself to continue, especially if you realize there's no healthy way to handle the situation, or simply that you owe them no explanation? Then silence is perfectly fine. Life doesn't always require you to stay in touch with everyone, especially when it only drains you. But let's look at the issue from a different angle, because not every situation is the same. What if it's an ex, someone who was once deeply connected with you in a long-term relationship? In this case, perhaps being straightforward would be worth considering. I bet if I were in that situation, I would choose to face it directly. For example, I could text, "Hey, I know you're trying to stay in touch and I appreciate that, but for me, in order to preserve my peace, I think we shouldn't continue talking, at least for now. Anyway, I still hope you have wonderful days and find joy on your next journey." This approach is both clear and gentle, offering both sides a proper ending instead of leaving things hanging. It's not running away, but placing a kind period at the end. What do you think? Can a clear goodbye be stronger than silence, or does each approach have its own weight depending on the person involved? In the emotional maturity journey, learning how to say enough is a necessary lesson, even if it comes in silence sometimes. A simple, brief message, gentle but meaningful, can skillfully place a period at the end of the story. For example, you say something positive like wishing them well, then express your desire for space. That's it. If they still insist on texting or pulling you into a conversation, you have every right to stop responding. At that point, silence is not avoidance, but a way to show that your boundaries are not just words. You're truly serious about them. This action is like raising a "do not cross" sign with a calm but firm attitude, protecting yourself while sending a clear message without being harsh. I think this is a topic worth unpacking because it touches on how we manage relationships in our lives. Who hasn't faced a situation where they had to decide whether to continue or let go, right? It's not just about ghosting or cutting off contact, but also about how we learn to value ourselves amidst complex interactions. Today we'll stop here, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts. How have you handled a similar situation? Or is there something about this topic that makes you wonder? Please share in the comments. I'm curious to know your perspective. A conversation this interesting shouldn't end too quickly, don't you agree? When it comes to stopping responses or ending an unhealthy relationship, the most important thing is not how you say it, but what you choose for yourself. Today's post is not about encouraging cold silence or painful ghosting, but about helping you realize that you have the right to protect your emotional space. The right to walk away from connections that drain you, exhaust you, or cause you repeated harm. We've gone through many perspectives together, from the difference between ghosting and intentional non-responsive, to handling situations politely when an ex reaches out. We've also understood that silence isn't always avoidance, but a choice of maturity when you've clearly defined your boundaries and what you need to keep in your life. If there's one thing I want you to remember after today's post, it's this. You don't have to answer everyone who ever stepped into your life. Not every door needs to be reopened, and not everyone who was once close has the right to stay, especially when their presence costs you your peace. Thank you for taking the time to watch until the end of today's video. Your presence and listening are what make these shares meaningful. If you found this content helpful, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next videos on psychology, attachment styles, and emotional healing journeys. Don't forget to like the video and share it with those who need to hear this. And especially, I really look forward to receiving your thoughts. Have you ever gone through a similar situation? Have you ever felt confused about setting boundaries? Please leave a comment below where we can learn together, connect, and accompany each other on our personal growth journey. See you in the next video. Thank you for being a part of this journey.